Hey guys, MoiDawg here, and today I want to talk about Foxhole. I wish we were talking about something fun like gameplay or maybe discussing all the cool new stuff in the update, but today I'm talking about why I'm not playing War 89, or I guess why I'm not playing the rest of War 89. Now before we get into that, I do want to first say that no, I'm not done with Foxhole. I absolutely love this game, and I truly think the devs have made something special here. It's an amazingly addictive and fun game, and one where I've never experienced so much great teamwork and emotional highs and lows, and the thought of not playing it has never really crossed my mind. But I need to take a breather. And after the start of War 89 and just how this same recurring issue has been happening for what I feel has been the past 6 or 7 wars now, I just need to. Foxhole needs to fix its respawn timers. If you're not familiar with how these work in Foxhole, respawn timers are dynamic. Whenever you die, there's a base timer of, let's say, 10 seconds before you can respawn. But if you spawn a few times in a row and you die immediately after each time, you start getting a slight delay as punishment. So your 10-second timer might turn into 15 or 20 seconds, which is the game essentially telling you, hey, slow down, stop rushing in there and getting killed. Just stop doing whatever you're doing and be careful. There's also a global respawn modifier based on population. So let's say Wardens have 1,000 players and Colonials have 800 players. That's not an even fight, especially when you distribute those numbers across front lines, mid lines, and backline regions. Less players fighting means less defense. Less people doing logi means less material getting to the front, and less people scrooping means less being built in factories. It's an issue that takes into consideration Foxhole as a whole and not just simple frontline numbers. And it allows for factions of varying sizes depending on time zones, since this is a persistent war, to have relatively fair fights and prevent steamrolls at low pop hours, or unbalanced hours. In this example, since Wardens are out popping collies, Wardens would get longer spawn timers and collies would keep the 10 seconds. Makes sense, right? Well, it's not that simple. These spawn timers don't appear to be relative to the actual population numbers and appear to be generic, hey, give this side a longer wait time. What I mean by that is if Wardens have 25% more people, then the spawn timers aren't just increased by 25%. Instead, they're increased 2, 3, or sometimes even 4 times. This could turn a front into one where one side is spawning every 10 seconds and the other side has to wait up to a minute just to start playing again. On one side, this makes total sense because of the compounding factor of backline logistics, midline distribution we just mentioned, but on the other hand, in practice, this mechanic can absolutely destroy relatively evenly balanced fights. At the start of War 89, we deployed to Westgate and ended up having a great time fighting the Colonials there. I'm being serious here. The Colonials were great opponents, and we thought we were really going neck and neck the entire time, slugging it out and just having really balanced firefights. It was really back and forth between both of the sides with a really well-developed front line, great flanks on logi, and a few sketchy moments for both sides where it felt like either faction could make a breakthrough. Until about an hour or two into the fight, and I just couldn't respawn fast enough anymore. In what seemed to be a fair and even fight numbers-wise, I was sitting at a respawn screen with 30 to 40 second spawn timers while waves and waves of infantry charged our lines. At one point, we even lost AI defenses on multiple bunker bases because we just didn't have the numbers as people spread out to try and cover the waves of enemies. What was an even fight ended up becoming lopsided. The Colonials, it turns out, had 10-second timers to our 30 to 40 second timers. As we tried our best to hold the lines, we were eventually overrun. Day 1 Foxhole is a numbers game, and the way to take ground is by throwing bodies and mammons since there is literally no other way. Nothing is unlocked, and if one side is able to spawn in 3 times quicker than the other side, well, there's no stopping that. The easy answer to all this is, hey Moi, Wardens outpop the Colonials every war, and this war is no different. And to that I say, sure, maybe they do. And I heard reports from Sigil, the Colonial Discord hub, that Wardens had 200 more deployments than Colonials at the start of War 89, indicating that yes, Wardens did outnumber the Colonials. That's true, but that isn't a for sure number on population since we don't get to see that, and the devs don't provide us real faction-specific population numbers. But if the numbers of players at war start is true, according to Foxhole stats, about 3,200 players logged into the game and were playing an hour into War 89. If we believe Sigil's numbers to be true about 200 deployments, that means a good estimate of player count is about 1,500 Colonials versus 1,700 Wardens, which seems pretty reasonable. It's an update war. A lot of large regiments who were Wardens in 87 and 88 swap back to Colonials for this one, and it's a tiebreaker war, with the current win count sitting at 44 wins for the Colonials and 44 wins for the Wardens. There's a lot to play for, and people showed up. So if these numbers are correct, we can say that Wardens outpop the Colonials by about 13%. But to make it simple, let's round this up and say Wardens outpopped by 15%. And if this is true, to keep things fair, we should be getting a 15% longer spawn time, which would be about 12 seconds, right? But we didn't. If a population imbalance is only 15%, why are we getting spawn timers that are 3 times longer? And I know there are people out there that will say it, but there's absolutely no way Wardens tripled Colonial numbers, since that would suggest that there were only 800 Colonials playing versus 2,400 Wardens, and that's crazy. We also have no way of verifying that, and I want to go with the numbers that we can at least somewhat verify, which is Sigil deployments and Foxhole stats. The devs answered this question about how spawn timers work a while ago in a Reddit thread, and Max said that although nothing is made public, everybody should know this. When one side outpopulates the opposing side globally, all servers, which means all hexes, respawn timers of the overpopulated side increase. Respawn timers of the underpopulated side decrease. When populations start to even out, respawn timers trend back to the normal for both factions, but it is not instant. It could take several hours before it evens out again. If one side decides to play all night and have a very high population advantage, they might steamroll several regions very quickly. Without the respawn mechanics, when morning comes, the population returns to normal and everything stagnates, with the one side very much ahead. So instead, with the respawn timer mechanics in place, when morning comes, the populations return to normal, and the team that was outmanned for most of the night returned to the fight with lower respawns, effectively simulating the same overpopulated conditions they dealt with in the night. This is where much of the very valid complaints about long respawn timers come from. Players who did not participate in that overpopulated period feel the consequence of those who did. It's not the perfect system, but we feel it provides the best solution to date for combating several issues regarding population imbalance in order to keep a game as complex as Foxhole fair for both sides. The key part of the statement is the fact that those who were outpopped globally will get shorter timers, but as the numbers begin to even out, the timers begin to trend back to normal for both of the factions, although this isn't instant. So it's quite possible that this mechanic might not really work properly at war start, since at the start of the war, you have no historical data to base these timers on. Everything starts at 0 at the start of the war, and as people begin to filter in, the game might interpret a trend of Wardens beginning to outpop Colonials by 2%, 5%, 8%, 10%, 15% within the first hour, and then will extrapolate those numbers to give Wardens a longer spawn timer in order to get ahead of the potential outpopping and dial the imminent Zerg rush, or at least what the game interprets as a Zerg rush, and we get insanely long timers for Wardens while Colonials get shorter. And now that this precedent is set, it's going to take hours again for the timers to even begin to recalibrate and even out the spawns. But the damage is done. Instead of slight adjustments where you might have a 10-second timer versus a 20-second timer, you get massive swing timers where you have 10-second timers against 40 seconds. And one side is greatly outspawning the other. I want to reiterate, we literally don't have population numbers and all of this is kept secret, but time and time again, we see these insanely long timer differences at the start of wars when population seems relatively even. 1,500 versus 1,700 players is relatively even. And again, this mechanic as a whole is a very important mechanic for long-term game health. And a persistent war cannot be fun if those who are constantly playing during global low pop hours for their faction are getting run over by waves and waves of enemies. But there's obviously something going on here with the start of these wars, since this is a constant complaint and constant theme from both sides. Day 1 Foxhole is very different from mid-war Foxhole, or even Day 2 Foxhole, since it's all about scrambling for territory, getting bunker bases up, and rushing as fast as possible. In this instance, 15% of a population increase is not a small difference. Both sides don't have all their cool toys either, and it's one of the more completely quote-unquote balanced times in the game. There's no asymmetry aside from a few grenades and rifles, and infantry players square up against one another and just duke it out between themselves. It's incredibly fun when you get good fights, and to be honest, War Start is a really unique part of the game that disappears within about 15 hours as tech advances, and the factions get their own unique weapons. By overestimating Warden Pop, quadrupling their respawns, and implementing 40-second timers while lowering colonial timers to 10 seconds, you compound issues in early game that might not happen in late game. When both sides in a hex are equal, and the only way to really gain territory in contested zones is through numbers, spawns matter. And they matter a lot, and whereas later in the war one person in a tank or a couple people defending a concrete base can fight off a swarm of enemies, early war is completely different, and spawn times do not reflect the difference in gameplay. As our timers went up, player cohesion would break, and instead of infantry teams working together, you had squads that were staggered and ineffective due to deaths and respawns. And as people began to realize that they're waiting 40 seconds between spawns, they start to play differently. Infantry needs to be fearless in Foxhole, and that is even more so true at the start of the war. But if you just want to play the game and not stare at a respawn screen, you're not going to want to run headfirst into a rifle garrison with a Mammon. You won't push out from behind your wall to a tree line, and you may begin to even hide in buildings, or even shoot from right outside your spawn point. Instead of creating space and pushing back against the enemy, and taking a chance that you'll get shot in the process, players begin to turtle. It's a mentality thing. Since they don't want to die, they want to be close to medics for heals, and they want plenty of cover to give them the best chance to extend the length of firefights, they're going to do what feels safe. I can't blame people for playing this way because it's 100% more fun than waiting to respawn. So while you have one side that's playing passively and defensively to prevent respawns and just play the game, you have another side that is aggressively pushing and happily dying since they respawn almost instantly. For the team that has the longer spawn timers, it's a recipe for disaster and simply a matter of time before you're overrun. And the worst part is, it doesn't feel like you're being overrun because you played poorly. It just feels unfair. And that's something games should never make people feel. I don't know what the right spawn timers are for Foxhole. I don't really know what the solution is, but I can confidently say that this mechanic, at least for day one, is not working as it should. Maybe hex or regional timers should be looked at as an opportunity because a lot of these front lines are very even, and these timers swing the pendulum way too far one way or the other. And this isn't a new phenomenon. I know this isn't a Warden or Colonial problem, but it really does feel unfair to whichever side gets the bad roll of the dice at the start of the war, when most wars are probably going to be around 15% of a population difference either way at most. Day one gains are important, and those that can't spawn in and defend their BBs will lose tech progress. They'll lose relic bases and town halls with full 24/7 AI coverage, and this will begin the slow grind of desperate defense until they get better tools to fight back and hopefully stage proper offensives. But that's if they stay. And I'm telling you right now, a lot of people, after just staring at respawn timers while they watch their entire line disintegrate in front of them, probably aren't going to log in excitedly the next day. And now, if you look at the map, the side that was supposedly weaker in numbers by 200 players managed to take every single neutral zone, as well as 8 relics and town halls across the board. I don't want to take anything away from those who have been fighting there, but it doesn't make sense to me that on a faction-wide global scale, a team with less numbers would win in every single front. And I really think the reason for this are because of these broken spawn timers. I love the fighting on day one in War 89. It was some of the most fun I've ever had in infantry combat in a long time, and it was ruined by these spawns. It was ruined by something out of our control, and it really just soured me on this entire war. I can't play it. I don't want to play it, and I'm not going to. I'm going to take a nice break and come back fresh for War 90, and hopefully by then, this horribly unfun spawn mechanic has been addressed. But what do you guys think? Am I crazy? Am I making sense? Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on timers, spawns, war starts, whatever it is. I love talking about the inner workings of games like this with y'all, and ultimately, I just want a fun game for everyone who plays it. I absolutely love Foxhole. I love the community, both Wardens and Colonials, and I love hanging out with you guys in chat on stream and interacting with you guys in the comments of videos. I really, really want this game to be successful, but sometimes it just gets so frustrating. So let me know if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, peace.